This lesson is about how to calculate percentage discounts. My first advice is to always start with 10%. 10% is really easy and you can do it in your head because to find 10% you just divide by 10. Here's an example. If we're trying to find 10% of 40, you go 40 divided by 10 and you get 4. So 10% of 40 is 4. Too easy, right? Now, you can also use this strategy to help you find other percentages that are multiples of 10, like 20%. So in this case, you would find 10% and then multiply by 2 to give you 20% because 10% times 2 is 20%. Okay, so 10% of 40 we already know is 4. So 20% is you take 10% or 4 and double it to find 20%, which is 8. You can also use this same strategy to find any multiple of 10. So for example, 70% is 10% times 7 and 30% is 10% times 3. So it works for anything. You can also do 15% using the 10% rule. So I'll show you here, 15% of 50. First of all, you find 10% and you halve the 10%, which will give you 5%. And then you add those two numbers together. 10% plus 5% will give you 15%. So let's work it out. 10% of 40 we already know is 4%. 4. And 5% will be half of that, which is 2. And then you add them together to get 15. And that's wrong, isn't it? It should say 6. Let's fix it. 4 plus 2 is 6. So 15% of 40 is 6. Now you try. Here are some examples for you on the screen. You need to pause the video and work it out in your books, and then when you're ready you can come back to the video and check if you got it right. So pause the video now and have a go by yourself. Alright, welcome back. Here we go. 10% of 70, you go 70 divided by 10 and you get 7. Too easy. 10% of 95, same thing. 95 divided by 10 gives you 9.5. Notice that it's a decimal, and you will know by now that when you're dividing by 10 you're moving that decimal point 1 jump, so it makes a decimal there. 20% of 60, I'm obviously going to find 10%, which is 6, and then double it to give me 20%, which is 12. Next one, 15%. They're probably the hardest ones, but it still works really well. So you start off by finding 10%, which is 5, and then you divide that by 2 to find 5%, which gives you 2.5, and you add them together to say 15% of 50 is 7.5. And last one, 70% of 30. 30 divided by 10 first of all, which is 3, and then you multiply by 7 to get 70%, and this should say 21, not 321. So 70% of 30 is 21. How did you go? I made a mistake, but I realised I'd made a mistake and fixed it. Hopefully you got them all right the first time. There are also some special percentages that work a different way. So I'll go through those and you'll see what I mean. 20% is a special one because 20% is the same as 1/5, which means you can divide by 5 to find 20%. So here's an example. 20% of 60, if we go 60 divided by 5 is 12. So 12 is 20% of 60. Here's another special one. 25 is the same as a quarter. 25% is a quarter. So therefore you can also divide by 4. Here's what it looks like. 25% of 80. 80 divided by 4 is 20. There's 2 more. 50% is the same as a half, which means you can divide by 2. So 50% of 120, 120 divided by 2 gives you 60. So that might be quicker than, you can divide by 10 and multiply by 5, but it's probably quicker to do one step and just divide it by 2. Last one, 75% is 3/4, so you divide by 4 and multiply by 3. Oh, didn't do an example for that one, but there you go. It's very similar to the 1/4. So if we were doing 75% of 80, we divide it by 4 to find out 1/4, and then we'd multiply that by 3 to get 3/4. So 3/4 would be 60. Okay, now you try. Here are some examples. Pause the video, work it out, and when you're ready, come back and check the answers. Welcome back. Here we go. Let's see how we did this time. So 20% of 150, I'm just going to divide it by 5, and 150 divided by 5 gives me 30. So 20% of 150 is 30. 25% of 160, I've got 160 divided by 4, which is 40. 50% of 300, 300 divided by 2 is 150. 75% of 24, well, I have to start by dividing it by 4 to find 25%, or 1/4, and then I multiply that by 3 to get 3/4, so I get 18. How did you do? Did you get them all right? Okay, well done.